Hey there, Wargamers. Welcome to another episode of Initiation Wargaming. I'm Austin from Brush for Hire and Death Ray Designs, and I'm joined by...
The Initiate, Chris.
Alright, so today we're going to talk about a new game that you're getting into that you've been really enjoying. I want you to tell us all about it.
Well, it's Malifaux, and Malifaux has been a lot of fun for me. It's been a different sort of game in that it has a lot of different genres kind of mixed in together. It's played with a low mini count, and so it's not all that expensive, but also just the different meshings of themes and characters and the way that things work together, the synergies. It's just a really cool game.
Low model count not only means that it's a low entry point for cost, but also because a lot of the models can be used sort of outside of their own factions. You have a way to dip your toe into these other factions with different aesthetic genres and different play styles. And on top of that, a box is, retails for what, $45, $50?
Yeah, something like that.
And that's a very playable force. You can start out with one of those starter crews and really get a lot of gameplay and figure out how it works, and it's easy to add on to it.
It brings a lot of things, a lot of depth into a game for a low cost, and also it gives you a lot of fun packed into one game.
If you don't like it, you could buy another one for the same cost as buying a single box of Space Marines. I think that there's really something for everybody in this game, and I think it's one that if you're looking to get into wargaming or you're looking to break into a new wargame, it's something that you should really consider. I feel that not only is it something easy for you to get into, but for you to get your friends into too. There's so little cost of entry that if you play any other war games at all, it's really easy to stomach the cost up front for a new faction. You can have a complete change of pace for $50 as opposed to hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Not to mention, I would say that Weird's models are some of the best plastic models out there, especially for this genre. They're just really well polished. And with Malifaux, you get so many more bizarre and interesting and unusual sculpts that are in this new line of plastics are pulled off with some of the most unbelievable finesse.
I think for one, Teddy for me, it was just the coolest model. I looked at the generations past and back in the metal models, and they were really cool looking, but this current plastic Teddy that they've come out with is it's my personal favorite. I can think of many different ways to paint it up, but also just looking at it in the gray, the plastic itself, I just kind of was like, wow, I've got to have that, and I actually built my whole crew around that mini because I was like, that's got to be something I play, so why not?
Even if you don't play a faction that uses them, people love the Teddy models. I think we classify them as creepy cute. So
I personally like the creepy cute faction because they have something as monstrous as this giant nightmarish creature that has been deemed Lord Chompy Bits, because how cute is that?
So if you're getting into Malifaux, there's a few things you need to know about the army structure or the crew structure. The groups of models that you'll be using in this game are called crews instead of armies, because they're small, and a crew usually refers to a smaller group of people. But you have a leadership structure that is pervasive throughout the game. Chris, you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I think you start with a master or a henchman, depending on what size game you want to play, and you buy them everything else from there you buy with Soulstones. The Soulstones is the pool that you're starting with, and so, for instance, like you would play in a 40k game, you start with a number of points. Well, in this, you start with Soulstones. But the Soulstones actually help you in the game as well. So what you'll do is you'll start your crew, you'll hire a master, and the master then hires the crew. Usually the master will cost 0, and then they actually have a cache of soul stones that they start the game with, which is the number of stones as active play starts. From there, you actually have the number of points, for instance, 50 or 40 or 35 or whatever, that you move from, and then from there you use those to hire the different individual enforcers, henchmen, things like that you actually want to play with. If you don't use up all your cards, you can do things like upgrades. Each crew has upgrade cards that are associated with it. Whatever you don't use, you actually get to put in a pool.
Soulstones are the sort of Swiss Army knife that the henchmen and the masters use to lead their crews to victory.
In game, they actually can affect things like added flips or give you better defense or things like that that can actually truly affect the way that the turns are going.
The masters, the henchmen, and the enforcers, as you mentioned before, can receive these upgrade cards that you can buy with Soulstones, meant to hire your crew. The rest of the models, the normal sort of infantry, can't receive those sorts of upgrades. But those upgrades are meant to augment, to give new powers, to unlock certain other types of models that you can hire into your crew, and various things like that. Let's talk about the card mechanic. So most wargamers might be taken aback by the fact that they're used to playing with dice, and they're used to that kind of mechanic, but with this game you don't use dice at all. You use a card flip mechanic. You wanna tell us a little bit about what is that something you like? Is that something weird for you? No pun intended.
I think it's a part of the game that actually intrigued me more than set me away from it, because if you're like me, you may be one of the people that you can have a great game and then all of a sudden the dice turn on you and you're having a bad game, or you're getting dragged through the mud, or the game never even started for you. And that's happened to everybody, and everybody has at least experienced it deeply themselves or seen it happen to a particular person in their gaming group.
Yeah.
Like, we have a guy in our gaming group that specifically is known as the guy who gets bad dice rolls. So for me, you take a 54 card deck and you can say from that deck, I have X number of chances of getting something good or getting something bad, and once I've done away with that choice for this turn, I'm not going to have the 2 of crows again come up because it's gone, or the black joker, heaven forbid. You'll never have that twice in a hand.
I think that's definitely something that makes me like the game a little more too, just because in 40K or in War Machine or any of the other dice-based games, you could go up against an opponent, or you could be someone's opponent that is rolling super hot the whole game. You're rolling, triple sixes every time. You're just dumpstering on them. But at the same time, with this, I feel like there's a lot more tactic to it. You've got to save certain cards for certain times. You're trying to preserve cards of certain suits so that you can trigger certain abilities and effects and spells. If you're good at card counting, you can tell, oh, my opponent has run through all of their 12s and 3 of their 13s this turn. They've had a great turn, but now I know it's the time to strike, because they've burned up all those great cards, and I know they're not going to be able to beat me if I lay down a 13 right now.
Not only that, but you actually get a hand of 6 cards at the beginning of every turn that makes for I would equate it to as if in a dice game, at the beginning of every turn, you would roll 6 die and say, ooh, I'm going to keep these aside for a good turn or rainy day, basically.
It's your rainy day fun.
And, use them whenever you think is, you see fit.
The hand is great because you have that reserve that adds. That's more what I'm talking about with that tactical layer of decision making. You have to use those wisely at the right time to cheat your card flips to get sometimes just enough to win, or just enough not to get a terrible hit against you. You also have Soulstones, which are yet another type of reserve that will help you. It's a very finite resource that you'll start out with that will help you augment some of those results. It definitely has. You feel like you've got a little more control over the game and a little more ability to steer the way things are going, so that it's not just, oh, well, I rolled a whole bunch of 1s again. I rolled a whole bunch of 1s again. Oh, look, I got a 2 this time. That's really cute. It makes for a game that you don't feel like you've left in the hands of the fate and the dice gods, where it's just, well, I guess I'm going to get what I'm going to get. You get a little bit of say in it, which is definitely an attractive feature for me.
It also makes you think more into where in the game you're going to put your attention and how you're going to run schemes and things like that, because honestly, if you're not rolling hot on the dice or rolling cold on the dice, and you know that there's kind of an average idea of what you're going to flip in this deck, you kind of have the ability to kind of plan out where you're going on the board a little differently and things like that. So, if you've got 12, 13, a red joker in your hand, you're rolling pretty hot in your hand, you can go do something really risky because there's a chance that you're going to be able to defend really well against something, and those victory points that you might get from that scheme or whatever it is could win you the game.
So let's take a step back on the schemes right now. This is supposed to be an entry-level sort of video, so let's talk about what schemes are. A scheme is a more specific term for Malifaux, but in general, throughout Wargaming, you have these things called objectives, and a lot of games use it. War Machine and Hordes do. You've got them in Wrath of Kings. You've got them in 40K. You've got them just across the board. If you didn't have these objectives, you would essentially be playing a game of kill each other, and some people like to play that kind of game. But adding objectives gives you a secondary goal throughout the game to achieve victory points to secure your win. Now, these things might be something like go and hold the point. Go take that hill over there and don't let the enemies anywhere near it. Might also be to go and recover intelligence from a building and return it to your captain. It might be something like escort the civilians across the board to the enemy's deployment zone. Those types of things in these games can win you extra points that you may not be able to make by just killing your opponents. It gives you a secondary goal that may be more attainable in certain situations than just outright slaughtering your opponent. Sometimes you'll find, especially in games like Wrath of Kings, you may come up against an opponent, like we have in the past, where it's just really hard to kill them. They're just so armored and so very tough to hurt.
Or those dice are not in your favor.
Or those dice aren't in your favor. So it's better to have a contingency plan where you can still score some victory points and maybe pull out a win in the end by taking these objectives. In fact, in a lot of these games, where people make mistakes is that they focus too much on killing their opponent and not enough on securing these other objectives or schemes.
I think for Malifaux, the great thing is that you can actually win the game and have lost all of your people in the game because it has X number of turns, depending on the deck flip, and also once your schemes are out, they're out there, and so the enemy has to do something about it, and if they can't get to them in time, you get victory points based off of that and you win.
In fact, Malifaux is a very unique game in that sense. Most of the time, even if you're ahead in victory points in games like Wrath of Kings or 40K, if you table your opponent, which means to destroy all of their troops so they have nobody left on the board, you win the game, even if they were doing really well with objectives and they have far more victory points than you. Malifaux, if you get a certain number of victory points, say you have some arbitrary number like 20 victory points. You've got 20 points in your favor, and your opponent only has 5, but they manage to kill everyone on turn 3. They have to play out the rest of their turns and attempt to score enough points through their own schemes or other means that they have at their disposal to meet or beat your 20 points, or else they still lose despite the fact you have nothing left on the table. So hopefully you guys learned something about Malifaux, or at least were entertained by us blabbering on about things. So thanks for watching. We hope that maybe we've enticed you to pick up Malifaux. If you're just getting into Malifaux and you'd like to ask us some questions, feel free to leave some comments below. If you like the video, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed already, definitely subscribe so you won't miss any of our videos. And until next time, happy wargaming.